Today, we're taking a look at two BMWs that are technically nothing alike, but in principle do exactly the same thing.
Jazz Club.
In this video, we're asking the question, in 3 decades and 5 generations, what's actually changed? Before we begin, an important note to mention. The BMW you and I know today is absolutely nothing like what BMW was in the early 1970s. Without delving into the nitty-gritty of the history books, back in the 1960s, BMW was a niche German car brand on the brink of bankruptcy, which was very nearly bought up by a not-so-niche German giant, Mercedes-Benz. What saved the brand was a Bavarian investor with his idea of a new class BMW. Focusing on fuel-efficient engines, lightweight engineering, a balanced rear-wheel drive chassis and enough room for a family of 4. Now, inevitably, some had more power than others. Take, for example, the iconic BMW 2002 Turbo, but in essence, that was their secret sauce for success. What became a catalyst for its success was apparently some kind of fuel crisis in the 1970s. People needed smaller, lighter, more fuel-efficient cars, and BMW was cashing in. So fast forward a decade, we're now in the late 1980s and BMW's popped into the equivalent of the App Store at the time and purchased computer-aided design, or CAD. This played a significant role in allowing designers and engineers to play with new designs and curves and closed headlights. CAD made it easier to create distinctly different body styles to the standard 4-door 3 Series saloon. Sure, it looked like a 3 Series, but aside from the roof and bonnet, every other panel bodywork was different. In fact, it was so different in the way it was built and the way it was marketed that BMW wanted to give it its own model line, the 4 Series, back in 1992. That was 30 years ago. And for reasons I don't quite understand, it took them 22 years to actually change the name to 4 Series when the F32 generation came out in 2014. Now, I do admit, in the real world, none of that really matters. In fact, where things do matter, this car is utterly brilliant. The seats are so soft, there's plenty of space, even in the back. It's got a decent boot. The visibility is excellent. One more thing that's utterly brilliant above all else here is the way it drives. So this is codename E36, and this particular model was the top dog in the 3 Series lineup, the civilian range. I'm not going to mention the M3. It's the 3255, and it came with a 2.5 litre petrol inline 6 engine, and that had all the latest technology at the time. Things like direct fuel engine, 4 valves per cylinder, and variable valve timing, also known as VANOS in BMW speak. Right, I've got the headline figures ready. It's 192 horsepower, 245 newton meters of pulling torques, 0 to 62 miles an hour in 8 seconds, dead, and a top speed of 144 miles an hour. But the best bit has to be the sound. Oh, the sound. Better is that this particular model came with the factory-fitted option of a limited slip differential. Simply put, what this does is, if one of the rear wheels loses grip, the differential forces power onto the wheel with the most grip, and that allows the car to corner a lot more confidently, but more importantly, it allows the car to do very silly but very important slidey things. Pleasant surprise is this gearbox, and yes, it may be another 90s automatic slush box, but it does a really good job at bringing together all 5 cogs with overdrive. It even has manual control and a dedicated sports, comfort and ice modes, and just having this gearbox makes it that little bit easier to live with on longer journeys, especially paired with a cruise control system that seems to use a ghostly spirit to automatically move the accelerator pedal for you. Easy
And that's not a word I wanted to associate with this car, but it is. And that's the theme that continues on to the present day. And the fact is, this new iteration of the coupe has been talked about non-stop by the press, but mainly because of its new nose job.
Once you're past the snout, there's a lot of similarity with the previous generations. The seats are soft, even in the back, the space is plentiful, it's got a decent boot, the visibility is excellent, relative of course to today's more stringent safety standards.
I don't even have to use the keys, I can simply walk up to it, it knows I'm here, and it unlocks the doors. Lovely. I can simply say "Open Sesame" with my right foot and the boot magically opens and closes. I can even gesticulate to command the volume to be raised or the screen to be switched off.
And it doesn't stop there. If the car thinks I'm going to cross out of my lane by accident, it knows to gently guide me back into the centre of my lane automatically. If the old car came with one ghostly spirit, this one must come with an army.
So this is the modern day equivalent, 100%, it's as clear as day. But when we delve into what powers this car, does it all go wrong?
So I've got the headline figures here, ready? It's 192 horsepower, 400 newton meters of torque, 0 to 62 miles an hour in about 7 seconds, and a top speed of 144 miles an hour. But hang on a minute, that sounds awfully familiar. It's the car from 1993, except this is a 420. This is one of the base engines.
And how it delivers that power is so utterly different than the car from 1993.
Funnily enough, it does have one similar feature that the old 325 also has, and that's when the engine suddenly switches off while you're driving. Normally this would be a problem, and indeed it was a rather expensive problem on the 325, which has now been sorted.
Here it's the work of an 11 horsepower electric motor paired up to an uprated 48 volt electrical system, and what this does is it controls the steering, the brakes, the air conditioning, allowing the car to coast with the engine switched off and even shut off the engine as you come to a complete stop.
No, this is not a BMW Prius, despite BMW and Toyota's strong partnership at the moment. What it is instead is a glorified stop-start system that gives you a power boost when you put your foot down, and I quite like that. Here's the thing I'm having great difficulty with. This car is brilliant in every conceivable way, and to drive it still has that rear drive playfulness without the risk of sudden death if you suddenly ran out of talent. You know, it would be unjust for me to say this car is all wrong. It really would.
The thing is, that 325 celebrated the advancements of technology and engineering at its time, a revolution for BMW.
And no, this isn't a rant about the diesel engine versus the sumptuously smooth 6 cylinders of the past. BMW make the world's best diesel engines. Fact. But what I was really hoping for is a fully electric version that emphasises BMW's focus on changing its brand perception, which it has clearly set out to do with its new face. The world has moved on, and yet the 4 Series, I must stress, right now, hasn't really changed a bit. It's just got better with every new generation.
But it soon will, with the all-electric i4 just on the horizon. This could be one of BMW's last ever combustion-powered coupes. It's really hard for me because I'm a petrol head, and that's a term that in the next decade may not have a place anymore.
We've got to remember that the world has moved on. We're living in far more environmentally conscious times. But
that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to compromise too much. If you're the kind of person who's always loved this kind of BMW, you will not be disappointed. This is by far the best version of a classic, timeless recipe. If you told me that I had to choose between these three cars today, I'd have to pick the original. But, and this is important, if I was stood next to an i4, that would make this one of the hardest decisions I'd ever have to make between cars. I've never been completely perfect, but that was always, I know. Perfect chassis. And essentially what this allowed designers and engineers to do for the very first time is experiment with curves and designs and headlights to command the volume to be raised. Oh shit! Bad idea! Bad idea! Bad idea! Bad idea! People just stare at you. Cameras, they wonder what's going on. Who I am? Am I famous? Have they seen me on YouTube before? No, honey pie, you've definitely not seen me on YouTube before. Maybe you have. Maybe you've watched my Ford Focus review, or my Tesla review, or my Citroen C1, or my Toyota Corolla review. That one got 100,000 views. Wow.